if the rest of this doesn't go well, we can always fall back on the Chithambaram family to do the singing.
If Shakespeare saw David Gower bat, he would have written a sonnet. That line came from Henry Blofield, not from me. But I'll add a couple of lines to that sonnet. When David Gower batted, the bat seemed to come in touch with the ball, only for a fraction of a moment, not to command, not to tell, but to gently whisper the scenic path to the body between point and cover. Arguably, David's the most stylish batsman of our generation. But in David's case, that style was accompanied by enormous substance. In fact, for the decade of 1980s, he is the second highest test aggregate scorer, second only to Alan Border. Now, nobody ever accused Border of being stylish, but he was considered the greatest player of a generation. For being the most stylish player ever, David's the second highest scorer in that decade. He scored 11,000 runs in international cricket. He scored 2,500. He scored 2,500s. He led England from 1982 to 89. Sadly for us, your famous wins include a win against India in India. He won the Ashes in 1985. It's our privilege today to celebrate that star, that substance, and that man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Gower.
Raju, thank you very much. Very eloquent yourself. I was a little worried that we only have about 20 minutes here and you're going to take up most of that 20 minutes with the introduction, but we're good. And the other thing that struck me only last night as we approached the lovely villa, Miami up on the hill there, one of your number, who will remain nameless for all the best reasons, wanted to have a severe word with me. Because in 1987, the semi-final of the World Cup in Mumbai, a fellow called Graham Gooch, who might or might not be a friend of mine, quote, swept England to victory against India in that semi-final. And our man, who will remain nameless, was worried that I was the captain that encouraged him to do so. Luckily, Google established the fact that I was nowhere near Mumbai on the date of the event. But I was watching.
So, this is a lovely segue. Things could have been very different. I could be talking right now to barrister David Gower. You went to Leicestershire to study law. A year into college, you dropped out of school and you decided to become a pro cricketer. What made you take the leap?
Well, okay, with acknowledging the audience we have, and I've already had one conversation along these lines tonight. All good Indian parents want their children to be, as you know, not entrepreneurs, that's a very dodgy word. They want them to be, especially from Hyderabad, they want them to be doctors, engineers, lawyers, all the rest of it. So I must have had some parentage somewhere. I arrived at University College London starting a law degree. I left 9 months later without a law degree to go straight back to playing cricket because my heart and soul was in cricket. Now, the advice was do the law studies, get your degree, and if cricket goes well after that, all is well, that's fine. But have something to back you up. But there was a man called Professor Thomas who taught something called Roman law, who I saw very little of in my 6 to 9 months at UCL. The odd lecture I attended, his Roman law lectures, but he was a very keen cricket fan and a member of the MCC, so within months I was playing professional cricket for Leicestershire, as you say, and every time I went to Lord's, I would look through the long room and I would catch the eye of Professor Thomas, Roman law professor of University College London. And then 2 or 3 years later, when things had started to take off and England was now my team as well as Leicestershire, I caught his eye again in the long room at Lord's, and he looked at me and we spoke for the first time really to each other, and he said, I think you made the right decision. And as it turns out, yes, it did kind of work. You know, or I say we, I mean I've managed to make a career out of it. The records are pretty good. The life as a player was brilliant in many, many ways, as something that we all enjoy. I mean, we all have this passion to do something that we enjoy and make it into a career. And if it has to be sport, well, it has to be sport. So I acknowledge the work that other people put in on my behalf. I acknowledge the work I put in sometimes on my behalf. And here we are, 20 years, give or take, of professional cricket, 30 years of broadcasting, which again has allowed me to stay in the same environment quite happily, with a lot of the same people, a lot of the friends we made, both in the same teams and in opposition teams. I mean, for instance, you had here, as I've been told many a time, the lovely man that is Sunil Gavaskar last year, who I played against, we captained against each other in 1984-5. I knew him to be a very shrewd man, very shrewd cricketer, very shrewd captain, and we then shared commentary boxes as well. So these are friendships that come with respect that we share for a long, long time.
Awesome. I should explain the process here. We'll do a couple of key moments that David will cover from his whole career. And after that, I got questions from many of you already, but we'll make it interactive. Just so that I don't miss somebody at the back of the hall. If folks with questions can line up when I give you a gesture, we'll make sure most of your questions get in. Make it interesting and provocative. Don't ask something you can find from Google. What did you do that? You can find that. But if there's something provocative, absolutely bring it up. David, the 1984-85 tour of India that had so much adversity, so much drama. I'll just let you speak about it.
Well, we've between Raju and I, we decided we'd talk about this as, obviously there is a pretty strong link to the audience here tonight. The three great challenges. This is a bit like a Monty Python's film. The one great challenge. The two great challenges. The three great challenges. The three great challenges in the 80s were, first of all, the West Indies, who were the finest side pretty much ever to play Test cricket. The Ashes, where of course the history says that England against Australia goes back to 1882, so the history tells you that's important. And going to India to try and win a Test series for an England team was almost impossible. It was done. So when we went in 84-85, we knew we had a tough challenge. We started in an eventful way, should we say. The morning we arrived in Delhi was the same morning that Indira Gandhi, as your Prime Minister, was shot by her own bodyguard in Delhi. So we had this ridiculously extraordinary situation where we arrived at the hotel at 3 o'clock in the morning. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we have a press conference to say we would like to offer our condolences to the entire Indian nation on the death of your Prime Minister. And the extraordinary thing was that we had an English press corps following us who knew all about it. The Indian press corps in that same room that morning knew nothing. And you can sense the shock, you can imagine the shock when we started with that. So not the traditional start to a cricket tour. 2 weeks national mourning. We understood that, of course. We were offered 10 days in Sri Lanka actually to allow India to do its mourning. Came back, went up to Rajkot again, came down to Mumbai to prepare for the first Test match. We then had another shock, which was a fellow called Percy Norris, who was the Deputy High Commissioner to India, the UK Deputy High Commissioner, was shot dead after a fantastic night at his residence. And panic sets in. Now, you imagine, sport normally is all about the competition on the field. It's all about England against India, Gavaskar, Kapil Dev, Amarnath, there are lots of great names of that time, and you want to concentrate on that. We were suddenly thrown into complete confusion because players wanted to know that they were safe, wanted to know if they should actually still be there. We had meetings, we had all sorts of things going on. And eventually it was decided that yes, we'd stay. We were assured that we were not per se involved and that we were safe, the tour should go on, and we prepared for that first test match in Mumbai as best we could. But I'll give you a clue, there was still a lot of nervousness in the camp. People were unsure about what was going on there. And on the morning of the game, you might like this, you might not, you never know. On the morning of the game, you can imagine with a first day or first test match of a key series, people are nervous anyway. They're nervous about their performance. They're nervous, will they bat, will they bowl, will they get runs, will they get wickets, will they catches, will they take catches, whatever. They're nervous about that, but people are also nervous about the situation. Now, you might know a man called Mike Gatting. The cricket fans will know who Mike Gatting is. He's my sort of age, he's a little larger, he's what's known as a stout individual. If he walks through that door at the end, we have to open both doors, that sort of thing, okay? I'm just trying to give you a clue here, this is relevant. Michael was my vice-captain, and we also had a guy called Phil Evans, who was a character, what we call a character in the game, very strong-minded, very strong-willed, big, strong, but he looked like a fast bowler, he was a slow left-arm spinner. Now, on the morning of the game, we are coming through the lobby of the Taj Hotel in Mumbai, that glorious hotel, iconic hotel in Mumbai. One by one, people are getting on the bus, and Philip is sitting there in the lobby of the hotel, and he won't move. And as captain, I have to say, look, Philip, you are important to our chances in this game, but what's the problem? And he said, look, I'm still very nervous about the situation. I said, look, it's fine. Look outside. There are police, there are troops, they are lining the roads. It's 10 minutes to Wankhede Stadium. They are lining the road 3, 4, 5 deep. It is absolutely safe. We have better than presidential style security. What is your problem? And he still wouldn't get on the bus. And after about 20 minutes of interest, of conversation, persuasion, and I want my key player, my key spinner to be on that bus, to be part of that England team, he eventually agreed. And he said, I will get on that bus as long as I can sit on the inside of Mike Gatting. Okay, so we have some response, which is good. And in all seriousness, it was still a nervous time. And you can imagine, the first test series, Capel was in good form, Gower was coming in. We lost that first test. So we now had ground to make up, 4 test matches still to come, in the days where people didn't play 5 test matches. So we still had time to make up. And the key game actually was Delhi. So we had a long old draw in Calcutta. The key match was in Delhi, where we were running out of time on the final day. We needed to bowl India out. Capel was batting. But the gossip for you here is that the great all-rounder that was and is Capel Dev, now the great golfer, the great tactician, the great captain, the great batsman that is Sunil Gavaskar, they were having what's known as a slight disagreement, which is the gentlest way I can put this. So there was a bit of a frisson in that dressing room. And all Capel had to do, to be honest, was bat through the afternoon session, and the game was drawn. But for some reason, this contretemps, this discussion, this gainsaying that was going on in the dressing room, he tried to have a big swing at the ball, got caught a deep mid-wicket, and that opened the doors for us. So that little thing, we talk about, whenever you talk about high-level sport, you talk about planning, you talk about implementation, execution, you talk about how do you get Capel out, how do you get Sunil out, you talk about all these things. Actually, all we had to do was let Sunny and Capel have a nice big argument, and we were fine.
Oh, that's brilliant. Kapil Dev and Sandeep Patil were dropped suspended for the next test match. Patil never played another test match. And a young man named Mohammad Azharuddin made his debut and scored 3 straight hundreds. Other than that, it was just another ordinary series.
You're right, it's just an ordinary series. Azhar was, this is to me, one of the great things. Azhar was brilliant. And as a young man coming into the test match arena for the first time, and if you understand the technical terms, whipping it through mid-wicket, time after time after time, and making those 300s, he played beautifully. And when he came to England the following tour, he played beautifully in England as well, proving that it wasn't just home conditions that allowed him to make those runs. So he was an incredibly talented batsman, which is why I find it such a, what's the word? Yeah, it's a big shame. Big shame that years down the line, other things crept in, and the golden boy, as it were, of Indian cricket coming through like that was then suddenly tainted. Stripped of that gold lustre and accused of things that we don't talk about in public. So these things happen. Obviously there are measures nowadays that are taken to try and prevent people going off the rails. But just in that one tour, just for those next few years, was the most lovely batsman to watch. Very stylish, very good, and very good at making runs.
Awesome. So some folks here are generation removed from their stay in India. So I'll fast forward to the present, some 30-some years later. This was barely a few months ago, and this was David Gower on TV. I forget the exact network. England had just lost the Ashes, and he's saying, look, it's awesome for Stokes, he's getting all the support he needs. Now look at Joe Root. The poor guy, he's losing a test match because his players are busy playing the IPL. England is not even languishing at the bottom. They're barely holding on to the bottom of the test table, right? And some people find it really annoying, and apparently I'm one of them. And I end the quote. This might be a rhetorical question. Is IPL hurting test cricket?
Right. Okay. I wish we had the original clip, because there is, now, going back to my not very conclusive legal training, you have to be very precise with your words. And actually Twitter proved itself to be very imprecise with its responses. What I said at the end of that Ashes tour, and it was a list of things that English cricket had as problems. The structure of county cricket, the arrangement of tours, there's so many things. But including, I referred back, this is where I'm going to be very precise, I referred back to the previous year, where 2 test matches against New Zealand, English cricket allowed key players to carry on playing at IPL, rather than coming home to play test cricket. And I said, not that IPL is bad for English cricket or English cricketers, but I was annoyed that those cricketers weren't playing test cricket for England at that time. And that was horribly misunderstood, so that's why I have to try and make it very much clearer here. Now, what we've seen in the last few months, and again, there are lots of ironies we can look at. What we've seen in the last few months is the really beneficial effect of the experience that players, not just from England, but from South Africa, all around the world, most of the cricketing world, get from being part of IPL. So we've started to play test cricket in the same way, almost the same way as people play IPL cricket. And it's been stunning. And it's what happens next is anyone's guess. It could all come to a grinding halt. There will be a day where it all doesn't work. But what we saw against New Zealand, 3 test matches, and then that 1 test against India at Birmingham, where I was in Mumbai, of course, to add my wisdom or something close to it to the game there, and that was fun. We saw England adopt these ridiculously unbelievable tactics to knock off 376 or something. So from that point of view, IPL, which is a phenomenon, has done a lot to bring, it's done a lot to bring through young Indian cricketers who wouldn't have had that same sort of exposure of playing in front of 60 to 80,000 people. We've been to the Coliseum today, which in its heyday, well before IPL, had 80,000 people cheering on sportsmen, gladiators. Mm-hmm. Most of those stadiums that you see nowadays, Wankhede, Kolkata, Eden Gardens, around the country, will hold anything from 50 to 100,000. I mean, Ahmedabad's ridiculous, but you get an entire country into the Ahmedabad stadium. But they will, so the experience for those guys playing in front of these massive crowds is the best preparation for them playing international cricket, again, with scrutiny of television, scrutiny of the world, and you're already used to that sort of pressure. So I think one of the great things IPL has done is expose those young players to that. The senior players get their exposure, the international players get to know each other as well. The only danger now is that it's going to take over too much of the time that is required by cricket as a whole. And I think I think the cricket world has to be careful, because there are people like me, but again, speaking to people over the last 24 hours, I know there are people who love the short game. And that's what it's there for. The game is there, the various formats are there so that we can cater for every interest around the room, every interest around the country, and cater for those tastes. So there are people like me who love to see what happens over 5 days.
Wonderful. I think Barrister David Gower would have done just as well, the way you defended your classic, so that's awesome. No, I'll go on, don't worry. 3 years ago, the question we were asking ourselves is, Virat Kohli, who then had 70 hundreds, is he going to beat Sachin's 100 hundreds? 3 years later, we are asking, when is Virat Kohli going to surpass Virat Kohli's tally of 70 hundreds? He hasn't scored one since Brexit. No correlation. Is this a semicolon, or sadly sometimes this is a full stop period? What do you think?
I think with Virat, I've listened to those that know him well and who have worked with him closely in that Indian dressing room. And one of my great friends is Raju Chithambaram, who I think said what Virat Kohli needs is a rest. And I think he's right. I think at the end of it all, sometimes the sheer effort, and there's no doubting when you see Virat on the field, there's no doubting the commitment, the effort, everything that he puts into a game. But sometimes that takes away the naturalness of your own game. And I think Raj is right when he says that 6 months away from the game, and he can come back with mind and body refreshed, because he is one of the fittest guys in the international game, in the international sport. But if this little thing up here, which is rather important to all sportsmen, is slightly misfiring, you need a rest. So I think it's more of a time for not so much the semicolon or full stop, but parentheses.
Excellent. Look, he's the first player ever to average 50 in all 3 formats of the game. Tremendous talent, and we all hope, for India's sake and Virat Kohli's sake, the next 100 is soon to come. So 2 topics specific to this audience. It's a little sad that since 1970, the wildlife population has gone down by almost 2/3. About 65 or 68% of the wildlife population has literally disappeared. The David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation is doing wonderful work to preserve our biodiversity, and you are a passionate supporter. If you'd like to share just a...
Well, thank you, Raju. Thank you to you all for the opportunity. Obviously, we're going to talk about cricket for the obvious reason. You quite like it as well. It's been my life. But I've always, and I think a lot of people in the room would understand this, I've always tried to have other strings to a bow, other interests, other passions. For those that don't know, and I wouldn't expect you to know, my early life was in East Africa. And when we left what was then Tanganyika, now Tanzania, lived in Dar es Salaam, we did a tour of the game parks, Serengeti, Lake Nyara, and Ngorongoro Crater. So from that early age, 5 years old, there has been a passion sparked in here about wildlife. Now, for a long time, of course, that has to be kept in the background. When things started to change, when travel was good, when I could afford to travel, I would go back to Africa again. And the passion for people like David Shepherd, so just to explain who David Shepherd is, there's often some confusion in the game of cricket, because there are at least 2 in cricket. One was called David Shepherd, spelled slightly differently, who then turned out to be the Bishop of Liverpool, who played and batted for England. One was David Shepherd, who came from Gloucestershire, who was one of the most famous umpires in world cricket through the 80s, early 90s. And my great friend David Shepherd, the late David Shepherd, was one of the great artists in wildlife artists in the world, specialised with his iconic paintings for elephants. And if you want to figure another figure, there are something like 400,000 elephants left in the world at this stage, from millions. So I've been a long time supporter of the foundation. I still do what I can alongside them. They're lovely. They are just one of the nice things about it is you've got massive organisations around the world involved in conservation. The Shepherd Foundation is friends. To me, they're friends. Family are friends. What they do is special. It's not grand in the sense the money that they have is not huge. So that's why I'm very happy to support them and raise their name when it gets an opportunity like this. I think you've sent a link out, haven't you?
Yes, so I send a link with there's a beautiful video about the wonderful work they're doing. And there's a website where you can donate, learn more about it. It's there in the WhatsApp group. You all must have received a copy. So,
I mean, the other stat, obviously, linking it back to India. Whenever I've toured India, so the 81-82 tour, the 84-85 tour, subsequent tours when I've been broadcasting for Sky, I even managed to get Philip Botham, who was not necessarily associated with conservation, but I even managed to get him involved in wildlife, and we've been to Karna, to Ranthambore, to Pench, to the tiger reserve. So one of the great topics for me also is the tiger, which is such an iconic animal. I'm a huge fan of the big cats, and the numbers there have started to recover, as you will probably realise. But again, we're talking 2,500, 3,000 animals in the wild. So this is one of those things that I find, for me, is inspirational when I go to Africa, when I go to India, to be part of all these things. So if that grabs you at all, thank you very much.
yeah. If you have trouble searching for the message in between pictures of coffee and stuff people are wearing and all kinds of fun stuff, it's hashtag ESWF, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation.
Raju, we're going to send it out as a main
Oh,
email.
okay, it'll come in a much more nice, glossy format. Thanks, Shubhati. All right, now we come to the last question before I open it up to the audiences. Can folks here learn something from David Gower, the entrepreneur, or do you have anything that you could leverage them through a collaboration?
Well, yeah, that little moment we had last night on the stage, which actually I found very, very interesting. Looking back and looking forward. Looking back at a career that was on the field with hair, lots of it which seems this must be the lighting, I guess. But anyway, looking back on those days, which are the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, so some years ago, was very, very rewarding. But the point I made at the end was we all have to move forward. TIE, as we said last night, is about moving forward and reinvention. So, the thought crossed my mind. Once I had the invitation to come here, and thank you very much indeed for allowing Thorman and I to be part of this extraordinary gathering of people and extraordinary people in the most extraordinary place. But once I knew I was coming here, you start thinking, where do we go next? What can we do next? And by coincidence, my long-standing friend, Sir Lord Botham, I keep forgetting he gets elevated every 20 minutes to a higher standing. But the three letters came up on Twitter, NFT. Now, you and I have had, we've had chats about this. To me, it's a largely unknown area, but it sounds potentially fascinating. Let's say if we could just encapsulate this room into something like that would be fascinating in its own way. So the germ is there, and I would be very, very interested indeed to see what we could do with NFTs, because as far as I can tell, in sport especially, there are these things out there already. But the few I've seen are, to me, completely unappealing. To be absolutely bluntly honest, they're unappealing, they're cheap, they don't seem to represent anything particularly special. And I think the opportunity should be there, must be there, to use something which I mean, for instance, we know that cricket in India is a very, very big thing. And cricket for Indians around the world is a very, very big thing. And we have our cricketing world, which spans the same continents you've just mentioned. Could be a very interesting place to try and develop something special. So I don't have the expertise, but I have the spark of the imagination that suggests that there could be something out there we could make to become special.
Can I add a little bit of color to what you just said? So, like David said, if you go to NFT sites, it's almost like baseball cards, novelties. It's almost frivolous. After we brainstormed a little bit, what we thought was, look, 1985, David went to Australia, scored 700 runs at an average of 80, won the Ashes, right? Now that urn that he held, if you create an NFT out of that, and you heard David's perspective of how he dealt with the India tour, with Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, all kinds of things happening, right? You get the inside out narrative, and this will be more of a premium NFT. And for folks who buy it, you subscribe and year's membership automatically to an elite club. So once a year, you meet, say, at Lord's or the Oval or someplace, David and other celebrities who are part of epic moments in cricket, be it from 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 20s. That was the idea. If you're a VC firm, if you're an angel, David might not say it, I'll be more direct. After this chat, please feel free to meet one-on-one in a small group setting, any group you find comfortable. Dharti has already agreed to meet with us, and I think she mentioned Manjusha, is she here?
Manjusha is here.
Where's Manjusha? Sorry.
All the way at the back.
Oh, all into the back. We got the bookends covered, Dharti at the front, Manjusha at the back. All right. So I opened with Henry Blofield. I'll close with Trevor Bailey. Trevor Bailey was asked, did you ever play a cover drive like David Gower? And he said, not even in my dreams. This has been a dream and a privilege, David.
Absolutely. Woo!
Can I just say, on behalf of Aaron and I, to be part of this last couple of days has been very, very special. We are aware we are amongst very special people from all around the world, with enthusiasm, thankfully, for cricket, so it makes tonight at least a lot easier for me as well, but obviously enthusiasm for all sorts of things which we can all learn something from. So may I say a really, really big thank you, to everyone who's made it happen for us to be here in this exceptionally special city, which, believe it or not, we hadn't been to before. We live just down the road. We'd never been down the road before. They say all roads lead to Rome. Up until now, it hadn't happened. We tried the M5, the M4, the M6, the M1. None of them went to fucking Rome. Anyway, so thank you very, very much indeed for having us.